Good to have you with us at this hour. I'm Daniel Chef for Arirang News. Let's start with the headlines. The MERS respiratory virus claims its first 2 lives in Korea, and the number of confirmed cases continues to rise. Hundreds more now under quarantine. Korea's 12th Innovation Center for Startups opens in Jeollanam-do Province. This one will focus on Korea's traditional agriculture and fisheries industries. Korea's current account surplus is in the black for a 38th straight month in April, the longest streak since the late 1980s. But it's not all rosy, as imports are dipping at a rapid rate. Our starting point today, again, is the fast-spreading Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak, which has people in Korea on edge. Today, the country reported its first 2 deaths from that virus, and 6 new MERS cases have been confirmed, bringing the total to 25. We now connect to our Connie Kim standing by at the news center for the latest. Connie?
Well, Daniel, the rapid spread of the MERS virus is raising anxiety and putting health authorities here on high alert. Now, as you noted, Korea's health ministry reported the country's first 2 deaths from the virus earlier today. The first was a 58-year-old woman who died Monday. She was initially hospitalized for severe asthma, but doctors say her condition worsened after she came into close contact with the first MERS patient at the hospital. Until her death, she was only suspected of having contracted the virus, but testing after her death confirmed its presence. Now, the second person to die from MERS was a 71-year-old man listed as the 6th MERS patient. He was receiving treatment in an isolation ward after contracting the virus from the first patient. Now, 6 more people have been confirmed to have the viral disease, bringing the total to 25. But Daniel, what's even more alarming is that 2 people were found to have contracted the virus from a secondary infected patient. All other patients confirmed to have MERS contracted the disease from the first MERS patient.
Well, Connie, the spread of the virus has unnerved quite a lot of people here in Korea. On top of the 25 confirmed cases, there are hundreds more in quarantine, I believe.
That's right, Daniel. Korea's health ministry says more than 750 people who had contact with MERS patients are isolated in their homes or in quarantine facilities to prevent the disease from spreading. Now, the numbers are rising fast, as the figure early this morning stood at 682. Now, Daniel, making things worse, the 58-year-old woman who was the first person to die from the disease in Korea wasn't under the close watch of health ministry, as she didn't share the same hospital room with the first patient. Now, and in an effort to keep young people from contracting the disease, about 20 elementary schools in Gyeonggi-do Province near the hospital where the 58-year-old woman was receiving treatment will be closed temporarily. And Daniel, you might also remember the person with MERS have traveled to China. Well, now he's since been diagnosed with the disease and is now under quarantine there. And Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency has reported that he has been put under supplemental oxygen, but is now in stable condition. And to prevent more MERS patients from leaving the country, Korea has placed a temporary travel ban on anyone under quarantine. Now, this is critical, Daniel, because considering Korea now has the highest number of confirmed MERS cases in Asia.
That's right. In light of recent events, Connie, the government held an emergency meeting today, and could you give us the details of anything noteworthy from that meeting?
Right, Danielle. Well, the ministers at the meeting vowed to do everything they can to stop the spread of the disease. Now, calling the spread of MERS a matter directly linked to public health and safety, the acting Prime Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said the government will mobilize the country's health and medical resources in an effort to eradicate the disease and dispel any lingering concerns about the outbreak. And from now on, all patients suffering from pneumonia and other respiratory illnesses will be monitored for a possible MERS infection. And in addition, the presidential office has put together a task force comprising officials from the Ministries of Health, Foreign Affairs, and Disaster and Safety. And they're charged with devising measures to prevent the virus from spreading further. Now, the government is moving quickly to counter criticism about its lax response to the outbreak, with the public knocking it for a late and inefficient response. Health experts have said the initial response is critical in tackling the virus, so the virus's rapid spread is a major concern, as there is currently no vaccine for the illness. And while a vaccine is in development, experts say it will take years for it to be available. Back to you, Daniel.
Well, thank you for that, Connie. That was our Connie Kim reporting on the latest on the MERS outbreak here in Korea. Let's move on to other stories. Korea's presidential office has slammed a bill passed late last week by the National Assembly that gives lawmakers the right to request changes to executive orders. President Park Geun-hye has indicated that she is prepared to veto that bill. So attention is now shifting to what happens next if the president puts the bill, or rather the ball, back in the Assembly's court. Our Park Ji-won reports.
What happens if President Park Geun-hye decides to veto a bill that has already passed the National Assembly? According to Article 53, Paragraph 2 of Korea's Constitution, a vetoed bill returns to the Assembly within 15 days with a written letter explaining the objection and a request for it to be reconsidered. The bill is put to a vote again if the returned bill is listed up at a plenary session. Paragraph 4 of the same article states that if the Assembly passes the bill again with more than half its total members in attendance and with at least 2/3 of those present voting in favor, the President's veto is overridden and the bill becomes law.
The Constitution gives the President the right to veto a bill as part of the system of checks and balances among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. However, the Constitution also acknowledges that a bill vetoed by the President should pass if most Assembly members, who are the representatives of the people, support and agree on it. That's because the Assembly's will is considered closer to the will of the people.
So then the question becomes, will Korea's rival parties release the controversial bill for a vote? And if they do, would it pass? If the bill fails to be listed at the full Assembly, it will be scrapped next May when all the lawmakers' terms end. The bill allowing the Assembly to request changes to presidential ordinances passed last Friday with 211 voting in favor among the 244 members attending the session. The sheer strength of support is why some watchers say the bill may be able to pass the Assembly again. The rebel camps are split on the matter. The ruling party is gathering opinions from lawmakers and legal experts, and lawmakers close to President Park are voicing their concerns. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy says the presidential office should just respect the National Assembly's decisions. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the government has opened its 12th Innovation Center aiming to foster Korea's startups and help them expand their business overseas. Our Choi Yu-sun tells us more about the new center in the country's southwest, which will focus on entrepreneurship in agriculture, tourism, and biochemical development.
There were just over 1,200 agri-food startups launched last year, representing just about 5% of all new venture companies. But the government is hoping to change that by teaming up with conglomerate GS Group at its latest innovation center in the southwestern Jeollanam-do province, where they will create a $9 million fund to foster startups in the field. Bringing together existing agri-food startup agencies, the center will offer a comprehensive support system in areas ranging from technology and funding to marketing and distribution. Similar agencies in the fisheries sector are also planning to join.
전남혁신센터는 미래 비전과 기업가 정신을 갖고 농수산 분야 벤처에 뛰어들고자 하는 청년 창업자들의 창업 인큐베이팅 캠프가 될 것입니다.
The Agriculture Ministry expects to expand new agri-food startups to 10% of total ventures by 2020, which will generate an estimated 12,000 new jobs along the way. GS will share its know-how in product development, marketing, and distribution for overseas markets to help the entrepreneurs take their products beyond Korea. The Korean government also plans to work with GS to develop tour programs to bring foreigners to Korea's culturally rich southwest.
무한한 관광 잠재력에다가 창의성에 기반을 둔 다양한 콘텐츠가 결합이 된다면 관광 산업은 지역 경제를 이끌어갈 핵심 산업으로 성장할 것입니다.
Last but not least, the government and GS are set to establish a biochemical ecosystem in the region with the hope of meeting the rising global demand for eco-friendly chemical products. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's current account surplus streak continued for a 38th straight month in April and is on course to set a new record next month. But it's not the best kind of surplus, as imports and exports are both on the decline, a trend experts say that could continue for some time. Our Kwon So-ah helps us look beyond the digits.
In the black again. And Korea has been there for the longest period since the late 80s, when the country logged current account surpluses from June 1986 to July 1989. The Bank of Korea's data Tuesday showed that the surplus in April was $8.14 billion. That's a 13.7% rise from the same month last year. But it's significantly less than the $10.43 billion surplus in March, which was a 4-month high. The central bank attributed the plunge largely to the primary income account, which recorded a deficit in April from a surplus in March due to an increase in companies' cross-border dividend payments. The balance of goods in April hit an on-month record high of almost $12.6 billion, and the trend is expected to continue. While the central bank expects the current account surplus to reach a record high of $96 billion this year, it's not necessarily good news.
Exports aren't doing well these days, but imports are doing even worse. So you could say that the current account surplus we're seeing right now is actually reflective of the sluggish economy. And if the surplus continues to grow at such a high rate, there's also the problem of a continuous appreciation of the Korean won.
Some experts predict that the downward trend of both imports and exports may continue until the end of the year, and Korea's price competitiveness in the global market will lose even more steam. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan are scheduled to hold working-level talks in Seoul later this month to exchange military information on North Korea and Northeast Asian security. The South's Defense Ministry said Tuesday that Japan's Intelligence Bureau Chief Tadashi Miyagawa will arrive in Seoul on June 15th for a 3-day visit. All eyes are on whether the two countries will discuss the signing of a stalled bilateral intelligence sharing deal. South Korea rejected the deal at the last minute in 2012 due to strong opposition from the public as bilateral relations soured over history and territory. The two sides have held working-level talks every year since 1971, with the exception of last year. It looks like there will be no joint celebration between the two Koreas for the upcoming anniversary of a landmark statement later this month. Last month, civilian groups from South and North Korea agreed to co-organize a 3-day event in Seoul starting June 14th to mark the 15th anniversary of the so-called June 15th Declaration. But according to a statement released by the South Korean Preparatory Committee on Tuesday, North Korea has backed away from the plan, saying it will be better to hold separate celebrations. The South Korean committee said, however, it will continue efforts to change the North's position on the matter. South Korea and the U.S. have established 4 principles that will guide the two allies in their decision-making and operations to counter the growing missile threat from North Korea. Seoul and Washington will also conduct weapons of mass destruction exploitation training in the U.S. every 2 to 3 years from now on. For details, let's turn to our Na Hyun-kyung.
The first of the 4 principles outlined by South Korea and the U.S. is that the allies will employ missile defense capabilities that are based on a combined assessment of North Korea's missile threats. This was stated in the 2015 Strategic Digest published Tuesday by the UN Command, the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command, and the U.S. Forces Korea. The second principle is for the two countries to enhance their military proficiency through combined exercises, while the third is to support capabilities required to implement the so-called 4D lines of effort. The 4D strategy is a concept endorsed by Seoul and Washington at the Security Consultative Meeting in October last year. It urges the allies to detect, defend, disrupt, and destroy North Korean ballistic missile threats. The concept applies in armistice, crisis, and war, and is said to utilize South Korea's kill chain missile defense system, the Korean air and missile defense system, and Washington's capabilities on and off the Korean peninsula. The last principle states that the allies' missile defense operations will be based on bilateral consultation. Meanwhile, the booklet also revealed that South Korean forces and U.S. troops conducted weapons of mass destruction exploitation training in June last year at the U.S. National Training Center in California. The exercises were aimed at increasing interoperability to maintain a WMD deterrent on the peninsula, and the sessions are tentatively scheduled to take place once every 2 to 3 years. 나현경, Arirang News.
North Korea's enigmatic leader Kim Jongun appears to be leading a generational shift by replacing top military officers with those closer to his age. This, according to the yearly magazine Strategic Digest, jointly published Tuesday by the U.S. Forces Korea, the United Nations Command, and the Combined Forces Command. The magazine said the young leader, who is in his early 30s, maintains an extensive and capable internal security apparatus to weed out those who challenge his power. The report comes just weeks after South Korea's spy agency said North Korea executed its defense chief for showing disloyalty to the young leader. More than 450 people, mostly elderly Chinese tourists, are missing after a ship sank in the Yangtze River Monday. Reports say that around a dozen people have been rescued from the scene of the sinking in central Hubei province, but strong winds and rain are hampering rescue efforts. The captain is reported as saying the Eastern Star vessel was hit by a cyclone which caused it to sink. The vessel was heading from Nanjing to Chongqing. Chinese state media says Chinese Premier Li Keqiang was at the scene of the accident, and so was Chinese President Xi Jinping. Rather, Chinese President Xi Jinping was ordering that no efforts be spared in rescue work. And we've come to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for watching. We do have more coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so do join us then.